New ground for Alex Eala from the Philippines. Maya joined.
She was down a set. She was staring at a scoreline that should have ended her tournament. And then, without warning, without a single dramatic gesture, she did something that made an entire stadium go quiet in that specific way. Stadiums only go quiet when they sense they are about to witness something they will talk about for years. What was it that Alex saw in that changeover that nobody else in the building could see? Why did her body language completely reverse in the span of 90 seconds? And why, by the time this match ended, was her opponent the one who looked broken instead of her? Stay with me, because this is one of those stories where the ending changes everything you thought you understood about the beginning. Let's go back to the first ball. Grass courts at Wimbledon have a strange kind of hush before a big match starts, a held-breath quality, like the whole tournament is waiting to see who blinks first. Alex walked out that Thursday into a matchup she had circled on her calendar for almost exactly a year, because the last time these two players shared a court, it ended with her heartbroken. 12 months earlier, at the Eastbourne final, she had held 4 championship points against this very opponent, Maya Joint, and let every single one slip away before losing a tiebreak that still stings when she talks about it. So this wasn't just a second-round match. This was unfinished business wrapped in a Grand Slam draw, and the crowd packing into that outside court sensed it too, because among the thousands watching sat a wall of Filipino flags, waving before a single point had even been played, chanting her name in a rhythm that carried across the grounds even from outside courts. And Maya wasn't walking in empty-handed either. Barely 24 hours earlier, she had produced the biggest win of her season, outlasting a returning Serena Williams in 3 sets on center court, a result that instantly rewrote her entire tournament narrative. She had arrived in London ranked outside the top 80, having won barely a handful of tour-level matches all year, and suddenly she was the story of the week, the underdog who toppled a legend. That kind of high doesn't just disappear overnight. It follows a player onto the next court like adrenaline still humming under the skin, and you could see exactly that kind of charge running through Maya as she stepped out to face Alex. From the very first exchange, she set a tone Alex simply wasn't ready to absorb. Early contact, aggressive angles, balls arriving faster than expected, pushing Alex backward, stealing the time she usually uses to dictate play. If you had only watched the opening 15 minutes, you would have sworn you were watching a changing of the guard. Alex's serve wasn't landing where she wanted. Her forehand, usually a weapon, kept falling just short of doing real damage. Worse than any single shot, she looked like she was chasing the match instead of steering it. That's the moment commentators start reaching for dangerous words. Words like upset, words like statement win. The set slipped away 6-3, and somewhere in the stands, in the group chats, on timelines around the world, people were already drafting the headline. Days earlier, in her pre-match press conference, Maya had promised almost exactly this kind of start, saying their history together practically guaranteed fireworks, that the two of them had shared an epic battle before, and she expected nothing less this time. For one set, she was making good on every word of it. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about elite competitors. The thing that separates the ones who fade from the ones who become legends. Losing a set rarely tells you anything about how someone is going to respond to losing a set. And Alex's response was about to become the entire story. Watch her walk to the chair after that first set ends. No slammed racket. No muttered frustration. No wild gesturing toward her box demanding answers. Just a calm, almost eerie stillness, the kind that either means someone has given up completely or means someone already knows exactly what she's about to do next. We didn't know which one it was yet. Nobody did. 90 seconds. That's all a changeover gives you. 90 seconds to rewrite a match that's slipping away in front of thousands of people and a global broadcast. What was said in that chair we will probably never know for certain. But what happened after it is undeniable, because the player who walked back onto that grass was not the same player who had just lost a set. Something had shifted. Not loudly, not with fireworks, silently, the way the most decisive turns in a tennis match always happen. The first change, if you were watching closely, was patience. Alex stopped trying to end points early. She gave herself more margin, more net clearance, more room to construct rallies instead of gambling on them. It sounds like such a small adjustment to describe, doesn't it? A few extra feet of clearance? A little more shape on the ball. But at this level, those tiny recalibrations decide entire matches. The moment Alex stopped feeding Maya the pace she wanted, Maya had to manufacture her own power from scratch, point after point. And that kind of forced aggression exhausts a player in a way that free pace never does. Then came the second adjustment, and this one was almost surgical. Alex began returning serve deep through the middle of the court, refusing to hand Maya the easy angles that had carved up the opening set. She was removing the first strike, the exact weapon that had built Maya's early lead, forcing her to hit one extra ball, then another, then another. Extra balls become extra decisions. Extra decisions become extra chances to be wrong. And slowly the errors started arriving. A forehand sailing long. A ball clipping the tape and dying in the net. Nothing dramatic in isolation. But a shift in a tennis match is never one loud moment. It's an accumulation of small ones stacking silently until the whole contest suddenly feels different and nobody can pinpoint exactly when it happened. You could feel it happening here. The break arrived, and the response from the flag-waving crowd told its own story. Applause growing sharper, longer, louder for every ball Alex managed to keep alive. On the other side of the net, something equally telling was unfolding. Maya started glancing toward her box more often, that quick, searching look players give when the answers that worked 10 minutes ago have stopped working and new ones haven't arrived yet. This is the part of a tennis match statistics can never fully capture. The psychological hinge point where confidence physically migrates from one side of the net to the other. You cannot see it on a scoreboard. You can see it in footwork. You can see it in shoulders. You can see it in the half-second hesitation before a player commits to a shot she would have hit instinctively an hour earlier. Once that hesitation creeps in, it rarely leaves on its own. You could see it settle over Maya in small, almost private ways. A longer pause before ball tosses. A quicker walk between points as though trying to outrun her own doubt. A glance at the sky instead of the scoreboard. Meanwhile, the flags kept waving harder. The chanting kept building between points. And every mishit from Maya's racket seemed to echo just a little louder than the last one. Alex sensed the shift immediately. And great competitors always sense it first. Before commentators, before crowds, sometimes before their own coaches. Instead of settling for parity, she pushed harder, stepping inside the baseline, attacking second serves like they had personally wronged her, constructing points with a kind of deliberate cruelty, opening the court wide, then closing the door with a controlled finish instead of a reckless one. This wasn't emotional tennis anymore. This was surgical. The second set ended 6-2, in a completely different world than the one it had started in. And both players walked toward the final changeover with the entire complexion of the match flipped upside down. The player who looked lost 40 minutes earlier now looked like the hunter. The player who had looked untouchable in the opening exchanges now looked like she was searching for somewhere to hide. But here's where this story could have gone in a completely different direction, and it's important, because so many comebacks in sports stall out right here. A player fights back, levels the match, and then, drained by the emotional cost of clawing her way level, hands the initiative right back over in the decider. It happens constantly. It's one of the cruelest patterns in competitive sport, and it's exactly the moment this could have quietly become just another almost story, another highlight reel of a fight back that ultimately fell short. Instead, what unfolded in that final set wasn't a continuation of the turnaround. It was something far more ruthless. The opening game of the decider became a war on its own, stretching through 6 deuces before Alex finally wrestled it away. And if you think 6 deuces to open a set sounds exhausting, imagine living it. Point after point of held breath, the crowd rising and sinking with every swing. She didn't look tired afterward. She didn't look relieved to have simply survived. She looked, if anything, sharper than she had at the very start of the match, as though the pressure of trailing had burned off every last trace of hesitation and left only clarity behind. Her return was arriving earlier. Her movement looked lighter, not heavier. The opposite of what you would expect from someone deep into an emotionally draining battle. She held that opening game, then broke again, and the crowd's noise climbed with every point, a rolling wave of sound that seemed to physically push her forward. 2 games became a lead. And this is usually the point. Games became a lead. And this is usually the point where a young player starts protecting what she's built instead of extending it. Nerves creep in. Shots turn tentative. The aggression that earned the lead in the first place quietly disappears, replaced by cautious hoping. Alex did the opposite. And this is the part of the story that should genuinely alarm every other player left in that draw. She didn't ease off. She accelerated. Game 3 turned into another grinding. Toe-to-toe battle, tight point after tight point, deuce after deuce. The kind of game that tests legs and lungs as much as it tests nerve. But she came through it again to move ahead 3 games to none. 2 brutal, contested games standing between her and total control. And she'd won both of them by refusing to let a single loose ball go unpunished. Maya kept fighting, and credit belongs there too. Because giving up is easy, and she never once did it. She chased balls she had no real business reaching. She tried new patterns, shorter points, different spins, anything to disrupt a rhythm that had swallowed the entire match. None of it mattered. Because Alex had entered that rare, almost unfair zone athletes chase their whole careers and rarely find. The state where every difficult decision suddenly feels obvious. Where the racket seems to know where the ball is going before the mind fully catches up. 4 games became a complete rout in Game 5, Alex blanking Maya entirely to reach match point at 5 games to none, and by now the crowd understood they weren't just watching a second-round match anymore. They were watching a full inversion of a story that had started with Alex on the wrong end of it. And still, right at the very end, one final piece of resistance. Serving to stay in the tournament, Maya somehow clawed her way to a 40-30 lead in that final game. 1 point from delaying the inevitable a little longer. 1 swing away from making Alex work for every last inch. It didn't matter. Alex closed it out anyway, denying her a single game in that 3rd set despite the fight, finishing a comeback that took 1 hour and 58 minutes to complete and finish 3-6, 6-2, 6-0. Read that scoreline again. After dropping the first set, Maya Joint won only 2 more games across the entire rest of the match. That's not simply recovering from a slow start. That's a complete and total inversion of power, the kind that reveals far more about a player's ceiling than any comfortable straight sets win ever could. Because anyone can look good when things are going their way. The real information, the kind that actually predicts how far someone goes in a tournament like this, comes from watching what they do when the match is trying to take everything away from them. What Alex showed on that court wasn't just talent. It was maturity, the ability to sit inside a losing position, resist the urge to panic, identify the exact adjustments needed, and execute them in front of a roaring, flag-waving crowd and a worldwide broadcast. That's not something you fake. That's not something that shows up by accident. But here's where this stops being a satisfying, self-contained comeback story and turns into something considerably heavier, because the reward for surviving that kind of battle isn't rest. It isn't a gentler draw. It isn't a chance to recover before facing tougher tests later in the tournament. The reward is immediate and it is enormous. Waiting in the 3rd round is the defending champion of this very tournament, the current world number 1, a player whose movement, consistency, and sheer competitive will have made her the standard every other woman in this sport measures herself against. Świątek arrived at this exact matchup her own way, dismantling a former world number 1 in straight sets just hours earlier, looking every bit like a champion with no intention of relinquishing her title without a fight. There's history between these two as well, buried a little deeper than the Eastbourne rivalry but no less real. They've split their 2 previous meetings, Alex winning the first back at the Miami Open, Świątek answering back weeks later in Madrid. A rubber match on the biggest stage tennis has to offer, with a 3rd-round Wimbledon spot on the line instead of just ranking points. If that doesn't raise the temperature on this next chapter, nothing will. On paper, this should be the moment the story quietly resets, where Alex becomes the clear underdog walking in with little realistic chance of causing a shock. That's how these matchups are supposed to read. Except something about the timing of this particular collision feels different, and it has nothing to do with rankings or reputation. Alex isn't walking onto that court wondering whether she belongs on the same side of the net as the best player alive right now. She just spent nearly 2 hours proving, under real strain, in front of a crowd that traveled across the world to watch her, against an opponent who had her one set away from an early exit, that she does not fold when a match turns hostile. She proved she can read a losing position in real time and rewrite it before it's too late. She proved that when the stakes escalate, so does her level, not the opposite, which is what happens to so many players when the lights get brightest. And here's the part that should terrify anyone still left in that draw. The frightening thing about today wasn't that Alex won. The frightening thing is that this version of her, the one who solves a match instead of surviving it, the one who blanks an opponent in the very set that was supposed to break her, is the version Iga Świątek now has to face. Will Alex be the favorite against the defending champion? Of course not. And pretending otherwise would insult how difficult that challenge truly is. But favorites rarely write the moments this sport remembers longest. Fearless players do. Every unforgettable run at a tournament like this begins with someone who simply refuses to treat the odds as a verdict instead of a suggestion. And if this comeback revealed anything at all, it's that writing Alex Eala off after one set, one rough stretch, one uncomfortable opening act, is a mistake her opponents keep making and keep paying for. Because somewhere in that 90-second changeover, something clicked into place that goes beyond tactics, beyond footwork adjustments, beyond even the discipline it took to close out that final set, without conceding a single game. What clicked was conviction, the specific, quiet kind that doesn't announce itself loudly but simply shows up, point after point, refusing to leave. And now that conviction walks onto the biggest stage this tournament can offer, carrying proof instead of hope, carrying 2 hours of evidence instead of empty confidence. Whatever happens in that next match, whatever the scoreline eventually reads, one thing has already been settled beyond argument. This wasn't just a second-round win. It was a message, sent quietly but unmistakably to everyone left in that draw, that the player they watched struggle in the opening set is not the player they will have to face if they meet her with anything left on the line. And that, more than any statistic, more than any final score, might be the single most unsettling thing about her. Somewhere out there, in a locker room a few courts away, the defending champion is watching the replays too, studying the same 6 deuces, the same blanked fifth game, the same refusal to blink when everything pointed toward collapse. And if she's paying close attention, she already knows this won't be a routine afternoon on center court. It will be a collision between a champion who has ruled this tournament before and a challenger who just proved, in front of a crowd that traveled across the world to see it, that she has absolutely nothing left to fear, that she has absolutely nothing left to fear.